Let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The church was packed. Tears, taps, and trembling hands over a sealed casket. But outside, soaked in rain, dressed in combat fatigues, a living ghost dragged something heavy toward the door. 2 weeks earlier, the knock came at exactly 6:47 a.m. Cassie Shaw had been waiting for it. She moved like she'd rehearsed, robe half-tied, eyes already red, hair messily tucked into a clip that hadn't moved since last night. The house was silent, too silent. No TV, no radio, not even the distant hum of the fridge. Just the approaching footsteps and the storm crawling behind them. When she opened the door, the officer didn't need to speak. There it was, flag, file, and finality. "Mrs. Cassandra Shaw," he said, rain soaking the brim of his hat. Cassie blinked. "Yes, I'm sorry to inform you, your husband, Lieutenant Aidan Shaw, was killed in action during a covert operation overseas. His body was unrecoverable. The Department of Defense extends its deepest condolences for your loss." Her knees buckled, but not from grief. She clutched the doorframe with one hand and reached for the flag with the other. It was warm, not from the officer's hands, but from how fast it had been folded. Still fresh, still humid, still fabricated. 2 continents away, Aidan Shaw wasn't dead. He crawled through broken terrain beneath a bleeding sky, dragging one leg and holding his side where the shrapnel had sliced through. His breathing was sharp, shallow. Every few feet, he stopped to check the horizon. No evac, no shadows, no signal, just a blood-soaked patch of land in the middle of nowhere. And a dog tag jammed into his palm like a curse. "Repeat, this is Lieutenant Shaw," he rasped into a failing comm. "Team Bravo is down. I repeat, down. Requesting extraction." No response. The static on the other end was more honest than anything he'd heard in weeks. He found a piece of wreckage from the blacked-out bird they never logged in the system, dragged it over his body like a second skin. Night came fast. The kind that steals your breath, not just your light. And still, no one came. Back home, Cassie changed the locks. She sat at the kitchen table in that same robe, surrounded by condolence cards she hadn't opened. The framed photo of Aidan in uniform stayed exactly where it was on the mantel, centered, spotless. But it was just for show. She lit a candle beneath it. Not for memory. For performance. And when Mitch called that night, Mitch Keller, her husband's old SEAL teammate, she didn't hesitate. "It's done," she said into the phone, staring at the envelope labeled, "Insurance claim. Do not delay." There was silence on the line. Then Mitch's voice, low and certain. "Good. You know what to do next." Cassie hung up and smiled. The world believed Aidan was dead, and in just a few days, she'd have a check with 7 zeros to prove it. Miles away, beneath the camouflage of night and dirt and dying light, Aidan stared at the stars through half-lidded eyes. He'd figured it out the moment the extraction never came. The whispers in the tent. The late-night redirections. The mission that didn't exist on paper. The way Keller looked at him just before takeoff. They didn't expect him to survive. But he had. And now? He wasn't coming home. He was coming back. The sun pierced through stained glass, casting fractured color across rows of black suits, medals, and mascara-streaked cheeks. The church smelled of varnish, roses, and lies. Cassie sat in the front pew, clad in a black silk dress tailored just for the occasion. Her blonde hair was pinned up into a quiet, respectable bun. A thin black veil covered her face, not to hide tears. There were none, but to frame them, to suggest grief, to keep the story airtight. The priest cleared his throat and stepped forward. "We gather today to honor the sacrifice of Lieutenant Aidan Shaw, a warrior, a patriot, a husband." Cassie's lower lip trembled perfectly on cue. The casket before her was sealed, polished, and heavy. It hadn't been opened because, officially, there was nothing to open. Unrecoverable remains. That was the phrase the DoD used. It was vague enough to work. She had planned every detail herself. The photos on display, the military in playlist, the folded letters she had forged from Aidan to his unit. The one where he wrote, "If I don't come home, tell Cassie I love her until my last breath." Applause had followed when she read that at the podium. Applause. At a funeral. Because it all felt so real. Even Mitch was impressed. Mitch Keller stood in the back, wearing the uniform he no longer had the right to wear. His posture was sharp, jaw clenched, but his eyes flicked from corner to corner like he was scanning for trouble. Or ghosts. He hadn't wanted to attend. Cassie insisted. "We need the photo ops," she whispered the night before, wrapped in the same sheets that once smelled like Aiden. "Being seen here," she told him, "solidifies the lie." So Mitch stood silently behind the last pew, hands folded in front of him like a penitent man. But his conscience was rotting beneath that clean exterior. He hadn't thought Aiden would survive. No one had. He remembered that moment too clearly, when he'd ordered the pilot to deviate, to leave the site early, citing enemy fire. It wasn't protocol. But with the comms jammed and the paperwork doctored by someone else's signature, the command chain wouldn't flag it. They never questioned it. Why would they? Aiden had made enemies before. He played too clean, too straight, and someone, somewhere, wanted him erased. Outside, across the street, a man in a gray hoodie sat inside a rusted pickup truck with broken AC and binoculars too expensive for a vehicle that cheap. He never took his eyes off the church. Didn't move. Didn't blink. The rain tapped against the windshield like clockwork. Then the casket came out. He leaned forward, cracked the window an inch, and heard the faint notes of taps, playing as 6 uniformed pallbearers carried the false weight of a sealed lie. His jaw tightened. His hands, calloused and scarred, gripped the steering wheel. There was a photo duct taped to the dashboard, Cassie and Aiden in dress uniform, smiling under an arch of sabers. He didn't recognize that woman anymore. The woman in the church was performing, and Aiden knew performance when he saw it. He'd watched too many ops play out the same way. Misdirection, applause, illusions, no real wounds, just staged casualties. Except this one had his name on the headstone. The crowd dispersed slowly. Hushed voices, shuffling feet, camera flashes. Reporters were present. Military wives murmured condolences. One of Aiden's old instructors placed a single Navy trident on the top of the coffin before it was loaded into the hearse. Cassie didn't cry until the cameras were rolling again. Then she collapsed into Mitch's arms, sobbing, shaking. People thought it was grief. It was relief. She had pulled it off. That night, Cassie poured herself a glass of wine and opened her laptop. $1,500,000. The deposit was pending. She exhaled deeply and smiled. They talked about it for months, how to make it work. Aiden's last mission had given them the perfect opportunity. No official GPS. No camera footage. No body. Insurance would pay out based on the military's own declaration of death. No need for a second autopsy. No need for questions. Just signatures, a closed casket, and a widow with a good performance record. Her only worry had been the SEAL community. But they'd rallied behind her. Donated. Cried. Wrote tributes. So much loyalty. All built on the wrong body. 2 nights later, Mitch came over. Cassie answered the door in silk and bare feet. They didn't say anything until they were in bed. "I didn't think we'd pull it off," Mitch murmured, staring at the ceiling. Cassie rolled onto her side and traced the long scar down his chest. "I did." He blinked. "You think he suffered?" Cassie leaned in and kissed him. "He's dead." But neither of them saw the silhouette standing on the ridge above the house, still as stone, watching, waiting, learning. Aiden hadn't returned home to reclaim what was his. He had returned to dismantle it, bit by bit, quietly, because war taught him patience, and betrayal taught him silence. Aiden Shaw hadn't spoken to another human being in 8 days. Not since he'd crawled his way out of the abandoned irrigation trench on the Afghan border, blood-soaked and shivering, the wreckage of his last mission smoldering miles behind him. His breath still came sharp, his ribs still throbbed when he twisted wrong, and his left arm carried a new scar from elbow to wrist, a gift from the shrapnel meant to kill him. But the pain didn't matter anymore. He was alive, and someone had ordered the world to believe otherwise. 3 days after the funeral, Aiden stood in front of a cheap motel mirror near the New Mexico border, staring at the man he barely recognized. His beard was heavier than regulation, hair longer. The usual strict lines of his posture were sagging under exhaustion. But his eyes? Still blue. Still calculating. Still seal. He pulled on a black T-shirt over the stitched wound and zipped up a battered hoodie. The bruises on his ribs made him wince, but he didn't slow down. The military duffel slung over the chair contained only what mattered now: burner phones, forged travel IDs, his service sidearm, a flash drive wrapped in plastic, and one perfectly folded dress uniform. He didn't touch the uniform. Not yet. Instead, he powered up the laptop he bought in cash, hacked into a secure DoD VPN through 3 rerouted proxies, and searched for something most men would never question: his own death certificate. It was there, clean, official, and signed. Digital signature. Lieutenant Commander Ronald Briggs. Same superior officer Aiden had trusted with the details of his mission. But there was something else. Briggs' signature was timestamped 6 hours before the actual firefight had occurred. Aiden leaned back in the creaking motel chair. 6 hours. Not a clerical error. Not a mistake. A decision. They signed him off before the bullets even flew. 2 towns over, Cassie sipped champagne on a white leather lounge chair overlooking the Pacific. Mitch stood behind her, phone pressed to his ear. "She's not responding," he muttered. "The guy I paid to doctor the SAT data? Gone dark." Cassie didn't flinch. "Doesn't matter. The claim went through. Money's already transferring. Even if someone investigates now, they can't reverse the payout without dragging in military protocol." "You're sure?" Mitch asked. Cassie looked up at him, eyes glassy under the California sun. "Aiden's not walking through that door, Mitch." Aiden was walking through another door. One that led into a quiet VFW bar on the outskirts of El Paso, where ghosts of soldiers hung thick in the air like smoke. He knew someone would be there. Someone who owed him. Someone old school. Behind the counter stood Frank Delgado, a Marine veteran with a busted knee, a silver beard, and a brain sharp enough to slice steel. Frank froze when he saw him. "Jesus Christ, not quite," Aiden said hoarsely, lifting his hoodie just enough to reveal his seal tattoo. Frank walked around the bar like he'd seen a resurrection. "They said you were Kia." "I noticed." Frank didn't ask questions right away. He just poured Aiden a whiskey and passed over a phone. "Tell me what you need." "I need access to military intel archives, satellite logs, personal accounts, medical records, and I need to know who the hell signed me off as dead." Frank nodded slowly. "You came to the right ghost." That night, Aiden sat in Frank's back office surrounded by yellowed maps, old service plaques, and a wall of monitors connected to God knows how many shady backdoors into government files. He traced the network of betrayal like a war map. His extraction order had been overwritten. A false report had been submitted. Briggs had signed the death notice early. But someone else had initiated the insurance process before the death certificate was even issued. The initiator's name? Cassandra Shaw. Filed as immediate spouse, application timestamp 2 hours after the firefight. 2 hours. No body recovered. No confirmation. Just a signature. She hadn't waited 24 hours. She hadn't waited at all. Aiden stared at her digital form. The same handwriting he used to admire on love letters, now sitting at the center of a betrayal that left him in a shallow ditch halfway around the world. And then something snapped inside him. Not loudly, not with rage, but silently, like the click of a safety turning off. The next morning, Aiden stood outside a military surplus store in Tucson. He didn't go inside for weapons. He didn't need them. He asked for something else, a body bag, military grade, regulation length, with reinforced zippers and black nylon handles. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Training exercise," Aiden lied with a faint smile. "SEAL team prep." The guy handed it over with a nod. Aiden paid in cash. He walked out with the bag slung over his shoulder like a souvenir. He wasn't planning to use it yet, but when the time came, he'd know what to do with it. By dusk, he was gone again. Aiden didn't return to the house he once owned. Didn't try to contact friends or family. He couldn't risk it. He operated like a ghost, blending into cities, parking lots, cheap diners. every move calculated, every shadow trusted more than a person. But eventually, he found himself standing on a hill above the cemetery where his name was carved in marble. The grave was real. The stone was polished. Lieutenant Aidan Shaw, 1986 to 2024, loyal husband. Honorable warrior. He crouched down beside it, stared, not at the stone, but at the woman in the distance. Cassie, placing flowers, wearing black, and smiling when no one was looking. Aidan stood up. His heart didn't race. His breath didn't shake. He just turned and walked away. Because he wasn't here to scare her. Not yet. He was here to study her. And soon, when she least expected it, he would return. Not as a husband. Not as a soldier. But as the ghost she created. The wire transfer cleared at 9:03 a.m. Cassie Shaw was already waiting with a mimosa in one hand and her laptop open to the insurance dashboard. The moment the green checkmark appeared, her lips curled around the glass, and she exhaled like she had just woken up from a decade-long nightmare. $1,537,622.94. Deposited clean into a new offshore account under the alias Cassandra R. Monroe. New name, new city, new life, and no husband. She shut the laptop, stood from the patio of her beach house rental, and stepped barefoot into the morning sun. Waves lapped gently at the shore as if celebrating her performance. Her black morning dress now hung in the back of the closet, next to a suitcase she'd never use again. The world believed Aidan was dead. And the money? It made the lie permanent. Down the hall, Mitch Keller zipped up a gym bag. His mood had shifted. He used to be sure, confident, steady. That was the version of Mitch that had helped coordinate the intel blackout, reroute the extraction op, and manipulate the death report through an old buddy at Fort Bragg. But now? Now he couldn't sleep through the night without looking at the front door 5 times. Couldn't check his email without expecting an encrypted threat. Couldn't hold Cassie without wondering if she'd do to him what she did to Aidan. He walked into the kitchen. We should lay low for a bit. Get out of the country. Cassie poured herself another drink. Why? The money's clean. The documents are tight. Nobody's looking for a man who's already been buried. Mitch frowned. Unless he isn't. She froze. The pause was barely a breath, but Mitch saw it. You're getting paranoid, she said quickly. Too quickly. You know the footage was wiped. The gear left behind. He was bleeding out. You said it yourself. There's no way he survived that. Mitch didn't respond. He just grabbed his bag and walked out to the garage. And he never saw the motion-activated camera tucked under the wheel well of the rental SUV. It blinked once, recording. Then again, transmitting. Aidan had eyes on them. 2 cities away, Aidan sat inside a dark motel room, lit only by the glow of 4 surveillance feeds and a laptop displaying insurance policy data. He watched her pour the champagne. He watched Mitch check his rear view twice before backing out. He watched, without blinking, as his own death paid for their future. He leaned forward, examining the screen. Cassie had initiated the claim through a third-party advisor, someone she'd worked with when they refinanced the house 2 years ago. The signature had been remote, digitally notarized. No suspicion, no oversight. But what she didn't know, Aidan had written the original policy himself. He'd chosen the company, helped select the plan, filed the rider clause, and buried deep in the fine print of that clause was a single conditional line he remembered typing with pride. In the event of classified death declaration, claimant agrees to mandatory verification audit upon payout. An audit. Cassie had unknowingly triggered it. And Aidan had just tipped off the right person to make sure that audit became real fast. At a corporate insurance office in Virginia, a quiet man named Lewis Hendricks stared at the flagged policy with a tight frown. He was one of the few people cleared for Level 3 military death benefit investigations. Most people ignored these. Not Lewis. He had buried too many brothers in combat to let foul play slide. He reviewed the dates, the signature mismatch, the early timestamp, and then an anonymous email landed in his inbox. Look closer. He's not the one who died. The SEAL who was supposed to come home never did. A friend. Attached? A blurry photo from a traffic camera in Arizona. Timestamped 3 days after the funeral. Aiden Shaw. Limping. Alive. Cassie spent that afternoon sunbathing. She ordered new clothes. Booked a facial. Researched houses in Belize. When she came inside, there was a red envelope slid halfway under the door. No return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single piece of paper. No threats. No names. Just 3 typed lines. A SEAL never leaves his team. You should have made sure the coffin was full. This time, the bag's for you. Her hands went cold. She rushed to the front window. Nothing. Just wind and waves. But her heart wouldn't stop pounding. Mitch came home an hour later to find her standing frozen in the living room. Envelope shaking in her hand. "What the hell is this?" she hissed. He read it once. Then again. Then he dropped it. His voice was low. "We need to go? Tonight." Across the street, Aiden lowered the binoculars. He didn't smile. Didn't blink. Didn't move until the sun vanished and the beach house lights went dark. The envelope wasn't a threat. It was a warning. The bag was packed. The audit had begun. The only thing left was the funeral. And this time, he would be the one dragging something through the door. The motel room smelled like metal, sweat, and silence. Aiden sat on the edge of the bed, a single desk lamp casting a yellow halo over the body bag sprawled across the carpet. The zipper was half open. Empty. For now. It wasn't a threat. It was a message. A symbol. A coffin that moved. He stared at it, jaw tight, chest rising slow and even, as if preparing for one final op. But this wasn't war, not in the traditional sense. This wasn't foreign soil or classified targets. This was home. And what Cassie had done, that wasn't betrayal. It was treason, against everything he had fought for. The knock on the door came at 3 a.m. sharp. 2 soft raps, then one louder. Aiden didn't reach for his weapon. He knew the rhythm. Frank Delgado. The old Marine stepped inside, wearing a flannel shirt and carrying a manila folder under one arm. "You're not going to believe what I pulled from the audit files." Aiden motioned to the table. Frank tossed the folder down. "They ran the payout fast. Too fast. Somebody inside the insurance firm helped override the verification clause you inserted. But that someone didn't count on you walking back into your own story." Aiden flipped open the folder. Inside, Cassie's signature. Mitch's financials. A printout of offshore transactions. And one photo that made his blood boil. Cassie and Mitch, arms around each other, celebrating at a rooftop bar in San Diego. 2 days after his funeral. He stared at it. Longer than he meant to. Then, he slid it aside. "What's your plan, Lieutenant?" Frank asked, leaning on the table. Aiden zipped the body bag closed with one slow, deliberate pull. "She staged a funeral for someone who wasn't dead. So I'm going to return the favor." Meanwhile, Cassie and Mitch were unraveling. They had checked out of the beach house by sunrise. No contact with neighbors. No goodbyes. Just silence and shadows. They headed inland, booking a rental cabin in Big Bear under a fake name. Cassie wanted space. Mitch wanted answers. Both of them wanted something neither would admit out loud, to know if he was really alive. Cassie kept playing the envelope over in her head, every word, every letter. The phrasing had a military coldness to it. Direct. No emotion. Just facts. She had heard Aiden speak like that once before, right before a recon op in Iraq. When 3 of his men were captured and he told his CO, "I'm not coming back until they do." And he didn't, until they were all home. Back in Tucson, Aiden moved like a shadow. He stopped by a hardware store, picked up a metal dolly, ratchet straps, a roll of heavy-duty black plastic, and a padlock. No questions asked. He paid cash. Then he visited an old contact at a veteran's shelter who owed him a favor. "I need a cargo van," Aiden said. "Long distance." "No," Aiden replied. "Just long enough." He didn't explain further. Didn't need to. The van was delivered to the motel lot at midnight. Inside the back, a folded stretcher, a blackout curtain, and the body bag clean, sealed, waiting. The plan wasn't about blood. It was about truth and trauma. and making Cassie feel the same breathless fear he felt the moment he realized his own wife had signed his death away. By now, Lewis Hendricks from the insurance company had escalated the audit to federal review. The forged documents, the unusual timing, the anonymous tips, all of it had raised flags. But what sealed it? The GPS ping from a cell tower in Nevada, linking Mitch's burner phone to Cassie's. An alert had been triggered. A location triangulated. The moment Hendricks saw it, he forwarded the data to one more recipient. Aiden Shaw. That night, Aiden parked the van half a mile from the Big Bear cabin. The woods were quiet. Windless. The kind of silence that amplifies every branch snap like thunder. He stepped out wearing tactical boots, cargo pants, and a plain long-sleeve black shirt. Not a uniform. Not anymore. Just the clothes of a man who no longer belonged anywhere. He approached the cabin slowly, every movement practiced. On his back, a pack with only two things inside, a flash drive, a folded photograph of Cassie, Aiden, and Mitch taken during shore leave in Hawaii. The last time Aiden believed in either of them. Inside the cabin, Cassie was pouring bourbon with shaking hands. Mitch sat on the couch, his Glock on the table. I told you we shouldn't have taken the money. Cassie turned, furious. You helped plan this. He stood. I wanted out after. You didn't. I trusted you, she hissed. The moment hung there too heavy, too late. Then, knock, knock, two soft taps. Then one louder. They froze. Cassie's glass shattered on the floor. Mitch grabbed the gun. But when he opened the door, nothing. Just darkness. A flash drive sat on the porch. No note. Just the drive. He picked it up slowly, brought it inside, plugged it into the laptop. A video opened. First frame. A desert. A body moving through sand. Bleeding. Coughing. Second frame. Aiden. Staring into the lens. Face swollen. Eyes burning. This is what it looked like when you left me. Then footage from a security camera. Mitch and Cassie. Kissing at the funeral home. Signing the claim forms. Then stills of the offshore wire transfers. Then, the photo of the body bag, with Cassie's name taped across it. The screen went black. They didn't sleep that night. Mitch stayed up with the gun. Cassie sat by the door with the lights on, waiting, not knowing what would come next. And that was the point, because Aiden wasn't trying to kill them. He was trying to unravel them, one nerve at a time. The invitation said it was a memorial mass, an honorable tribute, a final goodbye, a way for Cassie to keep his legacy alive. What it really was theater. Another round of image control, another public performance, another carefully choreographed opportunity to make the lie permanent. The church was larger than the first. A cathedral this time, stained glass windows 6 stories tall, casting saints and shadows across the pews. The air carried the scent of polished wood and faint incense. Television crews were set up discreetly near the back. One outlet from San Diego, another local, all briefed in advance. Cassie wore black again. A different black. A more elegant one. No veil this time. She wanted the world to see her face. Her pain. Her strength. She stood near the pulpit, reading the same scripted eulogy. Aiden was a warrior of silence. He never sought the spotlight, never demanded recognition. He just did the job, day after day. Country before self. Her voice cracked, perfectly, just as she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn photograph of them on their wedding day. A pause. A small smile. A glance at the camera. The crowd ate it up. Behind her sat Mitch, clean-shaven, stiff in a borrowed suit. Eyes forward, but empty. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. His jaw still hurt from clenching. He couldn't shake the image of that video. The footage of Aiden gasping for air under desert stars. The footage he knew only one man could have filmed. Outside, the wind picked up. Rain began to fall in whispers, soft and steady, slicking the steps and soaking the pavement. Aiden stood beneath the arch of an old tree across the street, dressed in full combat fatigues. He wore no rank patches, no name tag, just the uniform, the boots, and silence. Across his shoulders, a black military-grade body bag, sealed, motionless. His left leg still carried a faint limp, but his posture hadn't bent. He looked carved from granite. Alive, but not living. He waited until the hymn inside the church began before moving forward, step by step, dragging the body bag behind him like a coffin on a leash. The zipper jangled in the rain. The bag scraped against wet concrete. People inside would later swear they heard it, long before they saw him. Inside the church, the doors creaked open. Not all the way. Just enough. Heads turned slowly. Whispers rippled like wind. Cassie froze at the pulpit. Her hands clutched the edge of the podium like she was holding on to the edge of a cliff. Aiden stepped into the doorway, rain dripping from his shoulders, fatigue-drenched uniform clinging to his frame. His face was expressionless. His eyes, not angry, not crazed. Just awake in a way no one else in that room was. He didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Just dragged the body bag down the center aisle. Thud. 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 Gasps rose. Phones came out. One woman dropped her hymnal. A reporter whispered, "Is this part of the ceremony?" Aiden stopped 6 feet from the altar. Cassie looked like she'd seen a ghost. Because she had. Mitch stood, wide-eyed, backing toward the side exit like the walls were closing in. Aiden reached down, unzipped the bag halfway. Inside? A folded American flag, a pair of blood-soaked desert boots, and a laminated copy of his own death certificate. He didn't say a word, just stared at Cassie, long enough for her to begin shaking. She whispered, "How?" but the rest never made it out. Because Aiden bent down again and pulled something else from the bag. A hard drive. He placed it gently on the altar, then walked out. Just like that. No violence. No shouting. Just truth, heavy and undeniable, delivered without ceremony. The church stayed silent long after the doors closed behind him. The video went viral in hours. Someone from the church, probably one of the reporters, uploaded it raw. No edits. No commentary. Just the footage. A Navy SEAL presumed dead, crashing his own memorial service in uniform, exposing insurance fraud in front of clergy, mourners, and national media. Headlines followed. The SEAL they buried. Husband returns from the dead to expose wife's lie. Insurance scam unravels at funeral. A body bag. And the truth. SEAL's revenge goes public. Military watchdogs responded. The insurance firm launched a formal investigation. JAG officers reopened the mission logs. Within 24 hours, subpoenas hit 3 people, Cassie Shaw, Mitch Keller, and Lieutenant Commander Ronald Briggs. Cassie's lawyers advised silence. But silence didn't stop the phone calls, the press, the hate mail, the threats, and it sure didn't stop the guilt. She spent the night curled on the floor of a hotel bathroom, lights off, dress still damp with rain. She had watched the video 10 times, not to find a way out, but to see his face. He looked nothing like the man she'd buried, because she never buried anyone. And now she knew it. Mitch, meanwhile, tried to vanish. Left town. Ditched his phone. Tried to cross state lines with a fake ID. He didn't get far. Not because of police, but because a man in uniform beat him there. Aiden sat alone on a rooftop garage overlooking the city. The body bag was folded neatly beside him. The uniform still clung to him like armor. He didn't smile. He didn't sleep. He just waited. Because he wasn't finished. Not yet. Cassie stared at her phone. No notifications. No alerts. Just a single email sitting in her inbox like a loaded weapon. Subject: claim audit escalated. Response required. She opened it slowly. Her fingers trembled. Not from guilt, but from panic. It was happening. The money was being questioned. The federal review had begun. They were freezing her accounts. Her attorney's reply was curt. Do not move assets. Do not speak to press. Do not contact your husband. Cassie felt the walls start to squeeze. The beach house? Already under surveillance. The Belize property? Flagged and held under financial investigation. The car? Registered to a false name. Now revoked. Everything she built with the insurance payout was starting to vanish. Piece by piece. Meanwhile, Mitch Keller sat in a dingy motel off Route 15, staring at the TV as it played the footage on loop. Navy SEAL crashes his own funeral. Every news anchor used different words, But the story never changed. He had helped bury a man who didn't die. And now that man had made the world his jury. The knock on the motel door was soft. Mitch froze. He turned off the TV, quietly slid the drawer open beside the bed and reached for the handgun he always kept nearby. Another knock. This one louder. He stood, moved toward the door, looked through the peephole. No one there. He cracked the door anyway. A single envelope sat on the ground. Just like before. He picked it up. No return address. No markings. Just a flash drive inside. He plugged it into the motel's ancient laptop. A video opened. First, Mitch himself, weeks ago, handing a USB to a man in uniform at the airstrip. The moment he diverted Aiden's extraction order. Then, a time-stamped conversation from the comms tent. Mitch's voice. No, don't send Bravo for him. He's not coming back. The footage ended. One frame remained on screen. Aiden, staring into a surveillance lens, his face bruised, his voice low. You left me. Now I leave you, with nothing. Mitch ripped the flash drive out and hurled it across the room. But it was too late. That same video had been emailed to the Department of Defense 20 minutes earlier. Across the city, Aiden sat in a parking garage, laptop open, headset in, a small comm setup rigged beside him. Frank Delgado's voice crackled through the line. You were right. The whole op was dirty. Orders never filed through official channels. Keller had help. Briggs, Aiden said quietly. Yup. I found a buried report in the archives. Redacted as hell, but his signature's all over the pre-op phase. Looks like he greenlit your mission, then logged the key 2 days early. Aiden didn't answer. He already knew. This wasn't just betrayal by his wife or his teammate. It was systemic. Someone with rank wanted him gone. And they'd nearly succeeded. But now? Now the system was turning on itself. Because Aiden had lit the match. Cassie tried to regain control. She held a press conference against her attorney's advice and claimed she had acted on military assurances and believed wholeheartedly that her husband was deceased. I never intended fraud, she said, as glistening under stage lights. I was a grieving widow, but it didn't land the way it used to. Not after the footage. Not after Aiden's return. Not after her signature had been traced to the insurance claim filed before the death certificate. Reporters asked the question she couldn't deflect anymore. Why did you forge your husband's signature on a spousal release form? Did you and Mitch Keller begin your relationship before or after the operation? Did you know your husband was still alive when you held the funeral? Her voice cracked, not with emotion, but fear. The press conference ended early. She stepped off the podium to find a sealed box waiting in the green room. Inside, a copy of the insurance claim. Red marker circled her name, and Mitch's. Taped to the lid was a single post-it. You buried me with lies. I'll bury you with truth. Cassie dropped the box. And for the first time, she didn't fake the tears. Back in the shadows, Aiden continued watching. But now, he wasn't just dismantling their lives. He was forcing them to face what they were beneath: the money, the uniforms, the press statements. Cowards. Traitors. Liars. His silence was louder than any gunshot. His absence more haunting than any scream. Because Cassie and Mitch didn't know when or where he would strike next. Only that he would. Later that night, Aiden visited the cemetery again. Not his grave. His father's. A man who had served in Korea. A man who raised him to believe that integrity was its own kind of armor. He placed a folded flag on the stone. Not the one Cassie had accepted, but the real one. The one that had come with him across enemy lines. Tucked in his vest during the firefight. He stood there quietly, hand resting on the marble, and whispered, I'm not done yet. Then he turned and walked back into the war they brought home to him. Aiden stared at the encrypted email on his laptop, jaw locked tight, his knuckles pale against the aluminum casing. Frank had cracked it. Buried beneath layers of redacted files, shell corporations, and shadow directives was a single name that made Aiden's blood run colder than it had in the desert. Lieutenant Commander Ronald Briggs. The same man who'd signed his mission order. The same man who filed his death certificate before the mission even launched. The same man who shook his hand the day he received his last deployment stripes. He had always looked Aiden in the eye. Now, Aiden saw what was behind them. Briggs was no longer active duty. He had retired 6 months ago, weeks after Aiden's funeral, and transitioned into a private defense contractor firm based out of D.C., one that had received 3 major intel bids right after Aiden's death, one that had just landed a black-budget contract Cassie's insurance payout had helped cover. That wasn't a coincidence. That was strategy, and it meant this betrayal went beyond personal. It was business. In a dimly lit parking garage 2 blocks from federal court, Aiden met with a man who didn't wear a uniform anymore. His name was James Cross, former JAG investigator, now freelance military ethics consultant. "You understand what you're doing here?" Cross asked, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. "I'm not filing a complaint," Aiden said, sliding the flash drive across the table. "I'm issuing a report." Cross plugged it into his encrypted tablet. Video files, voice memos, financial data, chain of command documents, fraudulent logs, and finally, a recovered voice recording. "Mitch Keller," Briggs said, "as long as the body doesn't come back, the paper trail handles itself." Cross listened. Quiet. Still. Then he looked up. "This isn't just misconduct. This is treason." Aiden didn't nod. He didn't blink. He simply said, "I need it in court." Cassie's attorney called that same afternoon. His voice was hollow, rattled. "You've been subpoenaed." "What?" she snapped, slamming her espresso cup against the marble kitchen island. "You and Keller both. Federal court. They're opening a fraud and conspiracy investigation. Military grade." Her fingers went numb. "What if I don't show?" "Then you'll be escorted in cuffs." Mitch wasn't doing any better. The federal order hit him while he was sitting in a truck stop bathroom, nursing his 3rd coffee and a bottle of off-brand antacid. When he returned to the table, a manila envelope was sitting on his booth seat. He opened it slowly, like it might explode. Inside, a photo of Briggs shaking hands with Cassie at her first insurance meeting, dated weeks before the op. And behind them, Aiden's face, barely visible in a framed picture on the wall. A memory. Now a weapon. A handwritten note was clipped to the top. "You weren't the first to betray me. Just the easiest." That night, Frank patched Aiden through to a secure satellite call. "You sure you want to do this?" Frank asked. "They took my life, Frank. I want it back." "I get it. But dragging Briggs into court, that's different. He's connected." "I'm not dragging him," Aiden said, voice level. "I'm burying him." Click. Call ended. Inside her gated estate, Cassie finally lost it. She threw a wine bottle at the TV when another story aired. Veteran's wife under investigation for staging funeral fraud. Photos of her. Mitch. The memorial. The footage of Aiden in the doorway with the body bag slowed down, paused frame by frame like it was being studied in a courtroom. She went into her room and tore the closet apart. Ripped open boxes. Pulled out every cash stash she'd buried beneath floorboards and fabric. She needed to run. Now. But outside, in the dark, Aiden was already watching. He had found her. Again. He didn't need to confront her. Not yet. Court would do that for him. But he wanted her to feel what he had felt. Trapped. Hunted. Helpless. So when she opened the front door to load her car, she saw it. On the porch. A second body bag. Folded. Clean. And this time, it had her name stitched into the ID window. She screamed. No one came. The next morning, the Department of Defense announced it would hold a closed-door hearing regarding the fraudulent death of Lieutenant Aiden Shaw. Briggs was issued a formal summons. Cassie was given 48 hours to surrender her passport. Mitch? He tried to vanish again. But Aiden had already sent the court video of his fake IDs and burner transactions. There was nowhere left to run. Aiden sat on a bench outside the courthouse, eyes scanning the skyline. For the first time in months, he wasn't hiding. He wasn't dead. He was ready. And this time, they'd hear his story. The courtroom smelled like varnish, recycled air, and quiet panic. Aiden stood just inside the doors, flanked by 2 uniformed JAG officers, his dress blues crisp, medals aligned perfectly across his chest. The burn scar on his left temple, the healing mark across his jawline, and the faint limp in his right leg told the story before he ever spoke. He walked slowly down the aisle, every boot step echoing like a warning. Rows of spectators parted in silence. Cassie turned in her seat and locked eyes with him. Her throat visibly tightened. She hadn't seen him this close since the funeral. In the flesh. Breathing. Wearing the very uniform she had once helped him button. Mitch sat a row behind her, suit rumpled, hair unkempt, lips pressed in a dead white line. He couldn't meet Aiden's eyes. But Aiden didn't look at him anyway. He only saw the judge. Judge Harris was a composed woman in her 60s with icy calm and decades of military oversight under her belt. She didn't flinch as Aiden approached the stand. "Lieutenant Shaw," she said, voice clipped but respectful. "You understand the nature of these proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you wish to submit an opening statement?" "No," Aiden replied. "I'd like to submit evidence instead." She raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Aiden reached into his bag. First, he pulled out the sealed flash drive. "This contains military intel logs, showing that my mission orders were altered without authorization. Next, a printed set of emails between Mitch Keller and Lieutenant Commander Briggs. These show collusion to remove me from active operations, despite my fitness reports and service record." Then, Cassie's signed insurance claim, filed 7 hours before his death, was declared. "This document shows the insurance claim my wife submitted before I was even killed." And finally, the bombshell, a recovered audio file. He nodded to the court technician, who cued the recording. Mitch Keller's voice. "Briggs said if the op goes wrong, we get paid, and the system covers it." Cassie's in. She knows the timeline. The courtroom gasped. Aiden didn't flinch. Neither did Judge Harris. She leaned forward, her voice like ice. "Defense, do you wish to challenge this evidence?" Cassie's attorney stood, visibly sweating. "Your Honor, my client believed the death was legitimate." "She was misled. She wasn't," Aiden interrupted. Calm. Controlled. "She forged my signature on the spousal consent waiver. Here's a handwriting match from her tax forms." He held up the last document. A perfect overlay. Cassie's face drained of color. Mitch shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Every muscle in his body looked ready to bolt. But the JAG investigator seated near the exit didn't take his eyes off him once. They were already watching. Already preparing a second round of charges. Judge Harris folded her hands. "Lieutenant Shaw, you've submitted conclusive evidence of insurance fraud, conspiracy, and falsified documentation. Do you wish to press formal charges?" Aiden paused. Everyone leaned in. His voice dropped low, every word deliberate. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for truth." He turned slightly, looking at Cassie. "And for the record, I didn't die. You just buried the wrong part of me." Cassie's attorney sat down slowly, knowing it was over. The judge nodded once. "This court will proceed with full criminal investigation. All financial accounts associated with the insurance payout will be frozen immediately. Arrest warrants for Ronald Briggs and Mitch Keller will be executed within the hour." And then, turning to Cassie, "You are to be remanded to federal custody pending arraignment. You may not leave the state. Any attempt to flee will be considered obstruction." Cassie's mouth opened, but no words came. Mitch stood up, but the marshal was already behind him. "Hands where I can see them, Keller." Outside, the media storm had already begun. Camera crews. Veterans groups. Dozens of microphones aimed toward the entrance, waiting for a statement. Aiden walked out through the front door. Uniform pristine. Expression unreadable. He stopped at the steps. One reporter stepped forward. "Lieutenant Shaw, do you have anything you want to say to your wife?" Aiden looked past the crowd, past the chaos, past the headlines. Then finally, quietly, "She made a funeral for me. I just returned the favor." The storm came late, long after the courthouse emptied, long after Mitch was led away in cuffs, avoiding cameras like a cockroach in daylight, long after Cassie was granted house arrest, escorted back to her gated estate with 2 federal agents flanking her like ghosts of her own crimes. Now, the rain tore through the hills of San Diego like a war drum. The sky cracked open. The wind howled. And in the dark, the only thing louder than the storm was the silence inside the house. Cassie paced in bare feet. No makeup. No press-ready posture. Just a robe and trembling hands. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a call from her attorney. She didn't answer. What was the point? Everything had already unraveled. The money was gone. The lie was gone. Even Mitch was gone, booked, processed, and soon to face charges she couldn't shield him from. But it wasn't the loss of wealth or reputation that haunted her. It was him, Aiden. Not his face on the news. Not the silent presence in the courtroom. Not even the man in uniform with the body bag. But the eyes. The way he had looked at her that day, without hate, without rage, like he was staring straight through her soul. Like he already knew there was nothing left inside. She poured a drink. Sat on the edge of the kitchen stool. Rain slammed against the windows. Thunder rolled in like artillery. And then the doorbell rang. She froze. One chime. Then another. No one was supposed to visit. The feds had left. The media didn't know her address. Her house was locked down. Shielded. She rose slowly, clutching her robe tighter, crossing the hallway like each step dragged an anchor. The security screen lit up. And there he was. Aiden. No uniform. No weapons. No bag. Just him. Soaked from rain, wearing a simple black jacket and jeans. Scars still visible. Posture calm. Hands empty. But his presence? Full. She opened the door halfway. Didn't speak. Didn't breathe. He didn't ask to come in. He just walked past her like he had 1,000 times before, only this time, the air shifted with him. He stopped in the middle of the living room. Looked around like it was some museum of a life he never belonged to. Cassie closed the door behind him. Still silence. She swallowed. Why are you here? Aiden didn't turn around yet. His voice was level, almost quiet. You've told your version of the story. In court. On camera. Now he turned. But you haven't told me. She stiffened. There it was. The crack in the glass. The place where no lie could hold. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she started, arms folding across her chest. I thought you were dead. I believed it, Aiden. He raised an eyebrow. You filed the claim before the op even launched. She faltered. Briggs told us it was protocol. Briggs was bought, he said sharply. You weren't. He stepped forward. Slow. You were married to me. You knew my patterns. My deployments. My clearance level. You knew better. Her voice cracked. I didn't know how to stop it. No, he said. Calm again. You didn't want to. He let the silence settle. Thunder cracked again outside. The room briefly lit in flashes of white and shadow. You didn't check, he said. Not once. Not with the unit. Not with command. Not even with my damn mother. She couldn't hold his gaze. You knew, he continued, his voice dropping, that I was still out there. You knew the risk. And you cashed the check anyway. Cassie's lip quivered. I was tired, Aiden. Tired of being second to your career. Tired of the late nights, the secrets, the silence. Mitch, he understood. Mitch was a coward, Aiden snapped. He left me bleeding in a desert so he could crawl into my bed. She took a step back. So what now? You came here to finish it? To watch me beg? He shook his head. I didn't come for an apology. Then what? He looked at her for a long moment. I wanted to see who you really are. Her chin lifted slightly, defiant. And he took one breath and spoke without anger. Just truth. You're the echo of someone I once loved. She looked away. Finally sat down on the couch, suddenly small in a house built too large for honesty. You're going to destroy me, she said softly. I didn't have to, Aiden replied. You did it yourself. He walked toward the door. No threats. No grand speech. Just a final truth hanging in the air. Cassie, he said, pausing at the threshold. She looked up. I didn't die out there. A pause. I just woke up. And with that, he left. She sat there long after the door closed. Thunder faded. Rain slowed. But the storm inside? Never did. She looked around at everything she thought she wanted. The open space, the polished marble, the leather couches, the money. It was all silent now. Because the one man who had always stood beside her, through battles, deployments, and silence, had finally walked away. Not to punish her, but because he no longer needed her to know the truth. He had lived it, and that was enough. The courtroom was different this time. No cameras, no flags, no polished pews. Just federal lighting, reinforced walls, and the cold hum of accountability. Cassie sat at the defense table, wrists free but shoulders heavy. Her lawyer whispered options, plea deals, mitigation angles, leniency tactics, but she wasn't really listening. The room wasn't packed. Most of the media had already moved on. But every flashbulb, every blog post, every headline had already scorched her image into history. Not as a grieving widow, but as a fraud. A name now linked to one of the most public military betrayal cases in decades. Mitch was already in custody. He sat in the defendant's chair with cuffs locked to the table, head bowed. He didn't look up when the prosecution laid out the charges: obstruction of a military operation, falsification of federal documents, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and accessory to attempted abandonment in hostile territory. The legal words didn't sting. But what did? The moment the prosecutor referred to Aiden Shaw as a decorated Navy SEAL left to die by the very men and women entrusted with his life. That line stayed with Mitch. Worse than the sentence. Worse than the time. Because that was the legacy now. Not honor. Not valor. Cowardice. Ronald Briggs was indicted remotely. His charges came last: dereliction of duty, falsifying military orders, and conspiracy with private contractors to profit from illegal policy closures. He didn't appear in court, but his name was dragged through it, file by file, transfer by transfer. The defense tried to argue protocol confusion, but Aiden's evidence was airtight. And the moment the judge heard Mitch's voice, Briggs said the body doesn't matter, the room changed. The system turned on its own. And justice? It stuck. Sentencing was swift. Briggs, 10 years federal prison, stripped of pension, dishonorably branded. Mitch Keller, 6 years, minimum, with no parole for the first 3. Cassie Shaw, 5 years house confinement, full restitution of funds, and a lifetime ban from holding insurance, government, or legal documentation authority ever again. Everything she had built on lies was gone. The money, the properties, the public sympathy, even her last name, now cursed in every military circle. Aiden didn't attend the sentencing. He sat at a quiet cafe 2 blocks away, sipping black coffee and watching the courthouse through the rain-drenched window. Frank Delgado sat across from him, flipping through the day's headlines. "Hell of a thing," Frank muttered. "Briggs going down like that. Cassie, too. You sure you don't want to be in there?" Aiden shook his head once. Calm. Controlled. "I didn't fight for a seat in that room. I fought to walk past it." Frank studied him. "So, what now?" Aiden looked out at the wet street. The flags. The people passing by who had no idea what he'd lived through. He said, softly, "Now I live." Later that day, the Department of Defense issued a public statement. Lieutenant Aiden Shaw's record has been cleared and restored. His benefits reinstated. His honor, never in question. The military community rallied behind him. Veteran groups, Navy pages, private forums. They wrote tributes, sent letters, raised funds. One even mailed him a box of challenge coins from fellow SEALs, Marines, Rangers. Men who didn't know him personally but knew the betrayal. The silence Aiden had held onto for so long, it began to lift. Cassie, now confined to her estate with an ankle monitor and no press rights, watched the news alone. No more stylists. No more speeches. Only silence. And memory. She played the video again, the one of Aiden unzipping the bag in front of the altar. She paused it on his face. Not angry. Not broken. Just alive. She touched the screen, not out of guilt, but because she realized he had become something she could never manipulate again. A ghost she buried and never saw coming back. Mitch. He didn't speak to anyone after sentencing. Not the guards. Not the press. Not even his lawyer. He sat in his cell with a photo Aiden had mailed him. Not with words. Just an image. The grave Cassie had built, the one with Aiden's name. And beneath it, the words scribbled in ink. This was almost real. But I lived. You didn't. As for Aiden, he moved. Quietly. Signed the deed to a cabin in northern Colorado. No press. No noise. He visited his mother. Returned the flag she never received. And stood with her on the porch, watching snowfall touch the steps. She didn't ask for details. She just hugged him. Tight. Long. Like a mother who knew what kind of hell her son had walked through. And out of. He unpacked only two things in the cabin, a folded flag, and a photo of him in uniform, pre-betrayal, standing with a team that no longer existed. He placed them on the mantel, then stepped outside into the cold, and let it all go. No revenge. No fire. Just peace. Earned. The cemetery was empty. No cameras. No folded flags. No fake tears. Just one man, and the version of himself he had come to bury. Aiden stood over the grave he once watched from a distance, the one Cassie had erected after forging his death. The one engraved with his name, his dates, his stolen sacrifice. He held a box in his arms. Inside it, a copy of the forged insurance claim, the photo of Cassie and Mitch from the rooftop bar, his shredded deployment orders, and the body bag ID tag. With his name stitched across it, he knelt down slowly, every movement steady, deliberate. Then opened the grave. Not literally, but symbolically. He placed the box beside the headstone and began to speak. Not loud. Not for the world. Just for the man he used to be. You were loyal. You were blind. You trusted all the wrong people for all the right reasons. You bled for them. You died for them. And they left you buried in a lie. He looked up at the headstone, breathing slowly, rain beginning to tap across his shoulders. But I'm here now, and you can rest. He stood, folded the box closed, then lit a single match. Flames caught quick, curling up the corners of every page, every photo, every lie. And in seconds, the past burned in silence. Ash drifted upward, like smoke from the life they tried to erase. He didn't cry. He didn't speak again. He just stood there, eyes steady, until the fire was gone. Then he walked away. No fanfare. No parade. Just footsteps in wet grass and the sound of freedom in his chest. Back at the cabin, Aiden unpacked his last item, a journal. Blank. Fresh. No rank. No mission. No name on the cover. He clicked a pen open and wrote one word on the first page. Alive. Then he closed the book and set it down by the window. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again, clean, soft, untouched. And for the first time in a long time, Aiden Shaw wasn't watching his six. He wasn't waiting for an ambush. He wasn't fighting for truth. He was simply breathing, living, and no one owned his story anymore. He looked to the horizon, not for enemies, but for tomorrow. If this story moved you, even just for a moment, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? Which country and city? Drop your location in the comments. We read every single one. If you felt the emotion, the tension, the justice in this story, tap that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe if you want more stories like this, bold, emotional, and unforgettable. Because around here, we don't just tell stories, we resurrect the truth.